So glad to have you here. As you know, we announced data prep this morning, and so I had to obscurely title this talk. I mean, it's fitting title, but it couldn't be as descriptive as I wanted. So maybe you are the few that actually knew what you were coming to today. Maybe you understood the code. If so, congratulations. Yes. So I'm Eric Anderson. I'm the product manager for Cloud Data Prep. So we announced it this morning for the first time publicly, which I'm super excited about. I can finally tell my wife what I do at work. No, it's not that bad. But and she is here tonight, so you can give her a hard time. So Cloud Data Prep, as you know, or as you may have heard, is intelligent, visual, and serverless data preparation interface that runs on Google Cloud's data services. A quick overview on what we're going to cover today, and maybe to recap the announcement. It is available today in private beta, which means to select users. And then we plan in the coming weeks for this to be available, weeks or months. I don't want to promise anything or get you set to expectations. This will be available publicly in a public beta. So we're going to start with the need for data preparation, then go into the two benefit pillars for data prep. So first, the visual and interactive interface that we've described previously and you saw today, this morning, as well as the serverless aspects, how these are executed without any configuration on your part at basically any scale. And then we'll wrap up with a couple examples and spend most of our time, which is where I think you'd like it, in a demonstration. So, the need for data preparation. And I'm sorry to pull out the same numbers you've seen before, but it's part of the routine. You have to do this. As you may know, or may feel, 76% of data professionals say that this is the least enjoyable part of their work. It's like flossing or maybe doing the dishes, it sounds like. 80% of data professionals' time is in data preparation. So if we were to structure this conference like you do your data time, I'd be talking for like 3 days straight, and the ML team would have like 30 minutes. And nobody wants to hear from me for 3 days straight. So let's figure out what's going on and how we can fix data preparation. First, the cast and crew of those involved. There tends to be kind of a spectrum, or at least camps of people. There's the business folks who are close to the problem, the need for the data, and then there are those with the data skills, the data scientists or engineers, as we might call them. It turns out that all of these people have data preparation needs and problems, and Cloud Data Prep, as you see today, we think solves problems for all these people. Although they do have their common tools today, some of them available on Google Cloud Platform or within the G Suite. So I don't mean to discount those tools. These are great tools, and if you're comfortable with them, stick with them. In particular, if we're talking about data preparation, Data Studio is a wonderful place for data scientists in an easy to set up and familiar IPython-like environment. But today we're going to talk about data prep. And to get you geared on, again, why we need data preparation, I just want to start with this kind of analogy that we're going from raw to refined data. And people often ask, so what is this raw data that needs all this cleaning? Well, you've seen it before. This is logs, billing data, transactions. And the reason why we're doing the cleaning is because as soon as you try and visualize this or run a report, you realize that, there's these null values and that you prefer these things in different columns so that you could sort by them. And very quickly, the need for data preparation arises, and then you spend 80% of your time doing it. So let's use a motivating example throughout this that we can refer to for why we're doing this data prep. Imagine you're one of these line of business users I refer to. You're more familiar with Sheets or maybe SQL every now and then. And you'd like to measure the impact and value of your customer support portal, specifically web chat, we'll say, hypothetically. The first thing you might have to do is figure out where all this data lives. And then you're going to have to do some cleaning, as we mentioned, and you're going to realize through that process you need to structure it a little bit differently, enrich it. These are the steps that I'm referring to as data preparation. And as mentioned, you probably don't have the skills to do this. So if you were to try and do this on your own today, you might first enlist the help of an expert. We'll call it a data scientist, but it's somebody who can find and understand the data sources you're looking to use. So this data scientist is going to go through basically that same process we described, but they're going to do it in a way that you might not understand. This is like ninja scripts, as they're called, in Python. They're going to use R, and other people in the room are going to think, oh, R, that's such a bad idea. And they're going to use SQL, and they're going to they'll probably do this on a sample of the data, and they're going to use it on their local machine, and they're going to return this to you, and you're going to say, great, so this has all the answers. And they're like, actually, this is just a sample, and if you really want to run this every day, we're going to have to get a data engineer involved. So you're already like a week or two into this project, and you get the data engineer involved, and they do more or less the same thing, but this time they're going to do it in Java, and they're going to add unit tests, and they're going to run it on Hadoop, and they have this whole environment set up so you don't have to worry about it. But now you're another 2 or 3 weeks into the process. And people are asking you for funding, so you're getting executive stakeholders involved, and maybe you don't want to go through this in order to measure the impact. I might be a little bit overdramatic, but I might not actually. So this is where we think data prep can help. It helps you do this in your own workstation, on your own time, in the moment you need to do it. So let's get in to telling you about that first benefit pillar, the visual interactive interface. But before that, I want you to be able to contrast this with how we do it today. So I've done some of this kind of data science-y type work, and I have basically a little cocktail of queries and scripts that I like to throw at a new data set. Because I have to understand if this thing is exactly what it's called, how fresh it is. And basically, I'm treating data like a black box. I don't actually look at the data. I just kind of poke and prod it to understand it. This is one approach. Another, whereas data prep just throws you right into your data. Rather than feeling through a dark room for furniture, we throw the floodlights on, and you see your data, and you can interact with it immediately. We'll take a quick tour of some of the elements in the user interface so you get a feel for them. The first thing you're probably noticing is you're seeing distributions along the top of your data. Each column is profiled to understand the distribution, and it's presented in histograms and in ranges. In the case of like geographic data or other data that's easily described in different ways, we can throw it on a map. In the case of a time series, we display it in a time series. You're also seeing at the top a type for each column. And you're seeing as well a mostly green bar, maybe a little bit of black and red in there. This is telling you how well that column actually fits in that type. So data prep has detected the type. And if it's all green, then in fact, all the values are valid along that type. If you're seeing some black, there are missing values, red, then these are actually invalid according to that type. You can adjust the type as necessary. You can also create custom types if the 17 available immediately in data prep don't suit you. And there's also a series of date and time types. So we've kind of got types covered. This was the other kind of motivating example. So traditional ETL tools put you in kind of a logic-centric view. So if you want to apply transformations to the data, you typically see a block of where your data came from, a transformation, maybe a join. But at this point, towards the end of my pipeline, I don't quite know what my data looks like. And it's hard to have a mental model of what I need to apply to next. In the case of data prep, we just showed you how you have a mental model of your data when you're visualizing the data grid. And there, it's easy to detect what kind of a transformation you want to apply to next. You can either use the cues that we've provided for you in the distributions. You might detect an outlier or want to transform the missing or invalid values. Or if you see some other kind of anomaly, all you do is just highlight or click the data. And what data prep begins to do is suggest the transformation it thinks you're kind of invoking by this highlight. It may take a highlight or two in order to arrive at precisely the transformation you want. These suggestions are shown at the bottom, and you'll see that they have kind of sub-suggestions within a suggestion. So you can alter the suggestion as necessary and then apply it to your data set. So that you can apply one transformation that way, but generally you're applying lots of transformations. A clean here, a clean there, some structuring, enriching. These transformations are added up in what we call a recipe. It's a little more approachable than the word script, perhaps. And recipes in data prep, maybe slightly different than SQL or Python, are human readable, or at least human readable to most humans. And they are hidden by default. So if you're the line of business user who just wants to make a few changes and doesn't want to learn the world, it's very easy and approachable. But as you continue to use data prep, and if you become a power user, it's also very expressive. You won't need to feel like you're held back by some of the ease of data prep, because these recipes still behave like scripts. They export. You can apply advanced functions within them. And the recipe itself can be reordered, inserted, undo, rewind, play forward, roll back. That all means the same thing, just adding to it. So you've explored your data. You've applied some transformations. The data is looking a lot cleaner. But really, typically with these projects, you're trying to put the data in a new place, in a new form. There's still shaping and enriching to do. And joins tend to be the hardest part, at least for the SQL newbies. I'll put myself in that bucket. I still get a little bit anxious when I have to do a join and figure out the keys. So in data prep, you'll be looking at a single data set. You'll choose to add a new data set. You'll see a preview. So all along the way, you're kind of knowing you're on the right track. I've got my original data set. I got my preview. And then when you select a join, we detect common keys, as they're called, common fields that are likely to be joinable. And you can choose the keys that you want to include of these, and then go ahead and start choosing all the columns. Really, joining isn't so much of a scary process as much as just selecting what you want from the two tables and shipping it off as a new step in your recipe of transformations. You'll notice that basically everything is a step in your recipe of transformations. Renaming things, joining, enriching, which makes these recipes portable because they contain all the necessary steps, including formatting and that, to shape a data set. So we've done like a kind of a whirlwind tour of the user interface of data prep to introduce you to the features of how you interact with things in a visual, quick way. Now I mentioned quick because most of what we do here at Google Cloud, we pride ourselves in it being very scalable. So how do you quickly navigate, change columns on up to petabytes of data? Well, what we initially do in data prep is we take a sample. You're always operating in the browser on a sample of your data. And we give you some control over that sampling process so you can make sure it's representative. And so this next bit is about how we then take the transformations that you've applied on your sample and scale them out to run it on any size. Now, here I draw a contrast not to traditional ETL tools or to data science approaches to data preparation, but in fact to other kind of standard approaches to data preparation. There are other vendors and tools out there to provide data preparation tooling. And in those cases, what we might call first generation, they empower business users to apply transformations themselves. But it still gets hard when you want to scale this out. You still need to hire an IT and a data ops team to manage a cluster of some kind. You have now multiple vendors that are providing you different parts of the solution. So you're negotiating org-wide licenses or have to offset costs. And then finally, there's this app permissions, data permissions, software permissions that need to be coordinated. Part of the benefit of having this integrated into Google Cloud Platform is that the execution environment is dead simple, and it's baked right into all the permissioning models you're used to. You simply hit run job, and we spin up a data flow job and execute this across across the entire data set. So let's go into a little bit more about how Dataflow does this for you. Behind the scenes, these are the steps that occur when a user clicks Run Job. Data Prep creates an Apache Beam pipeline in Java and submits that pipeline to Cloud Dataflow. So this is a translation from your human-readable script or recipe to a Java pipeline that you may or may not be very familiar with. Dataflow then does what it usually does with a pipeline of this. It detects the size and pace at which it's making progress through the data set and auto-scales as necessary. It continues to add resources optimized for the execution of the job. The job is producing metrics, monitoring metrics, that are then surfaced to an easy-to-read UI that you can click to if you so choose. But I can imagine many users are happy to not look at the monitoring UI. And as it's being processed, which is kind of unique to a data prep job and not every Dataflow job, we're doing profiling. So as I mentioned at the beginning, you saw a perhaps representative sample of your data set. You saw histograms, typing, and values. But these were all histograms on the sample. So one of the things you might be wondering after you execute this over perhaps petabytes of data is that sample, the 10 megabytes, even representative? And so data prep is then going to return to you a profile of your data. So here's a sample profile. Immediately you're seeing the histograms you saw before and the typing and data validation you saw before. We're also seeing a little bit more information, which can help you, like I said, make the decision of whether this is in fact representative and if there are any issues. If there are, you can easily jump back into your recipe, take a new sample, or make the necessary corrections. And from this view, as you can see, we can also export results and view a recipe. So you're probably wondering where this petabyte of transformation just ended up. As with the integration with Dataflow, data prep is integrated with BigQuery and cloud storage as the obvious solution, storage solutions. You can read BigQuery tables, cloud storage files of the expected common types. And then, of course, you can use these similar storage as targets. Now, there's a lot of other storage systems on Google Cloud, and we'll look to those as well in the future. And then, of course, there's other non-Google storage systems that we'd love to support in the future. But we're finding our users in the private alpha that we've had previously have had no problem keeping themselves busy with BigQuery and cloud storage. And for many of our BigQuery users, this is a boon for them in terms of database migration and schema migration. So in maybe 15 or 20 minutes, we've kind of covered the nuts and bolts of data prep. I want to go into a demo, as promised. We'll spend the bulk of our time here. Just to kind of give you some background on the demo, we mentioned earlier that our motivating example was a line of business user who wanted to measure the impact and quality of the web chat experience for their customers. I often hear this as like, I want a 360 view of my customer, as we mentioned earlier. And I guess what that means is that I want to see what the customer experience is like when they're learning about the product, when they're purchasing the product, when they come back for support on the product, and maybe when they're not even interacting with the product elsewhere, in their daily lives. Businesses want to understand users in this sense, and normally doing this is difficult. But in what we have here, maybe a half hour, we're going to see if we can get a 360 view of our customer with the help of Cloud Data Prep. So let's imagine I'm here in my, I don't need this anymore, my Data Prep kind of homepage, and you're already seeing a few concepts that may be new to you. So flows, data sets, and jobs as listed across the top. A flow is kind of like a workspace. This is where I'm going to put a collection of files that I'm working on for a certain project. Data sets are what they sound like, as well as jobs or an execution on Dataflow. So we're going to create a workspace for this project. We'll call it 360 view because we're not afraid of buzzwords. And I'm going to add some data sets. Now, let's pretend that an engineer friend of ours was able to gather the necessary files that he thought or she thought would be interesting and put them in a GCS bucket for us. So I've got here the web chat log, a sample web chat log, some Twitter information. This is kind of in vogue. Everyone wants to do social analytics. And a web customer database. So I don't really know what's in here, as I often don't, starting a project like this. I'm adding them to my flow. And the first thing you'll notice is a couple helps for your project. So you're seeing on your left? Yes, your left is my left. You're seeing on your left the lineage of the data. In this case, I have the black data set, which is the actual data set, and then a virtual data set. And in between them is my recipe, or set of transformations. In this case, there isn't a recipe, right? I haven't done anything. Well, in fact, there might be. So data prep, as it loads a data set, makes some educated guesses about the first thing you'd want to do. It tries to delimitate CSVs into columns and that sort of thing. And so you can see in this preview in the sidebar what data prep has initially done in that recipe. So my web chat log looks just like an unreadable log at this point, so not much done there. In the case of the Twitter file, data prep's been able to delimitate this into some rows. And similarly for the customer database. Let's start with this Twitter 360 file. Oh boy. I actually knew this was coming, but I don't like it every time I see it. So this is a nested JSON-like looking thing, is what I'm guessing. And in fact, the typing up here is telling me this is an object of some kind. It's all in a single column. And my histogram is not helping too much. So let me bring this out a bit. Yep, lots of punctuation. So I can expand one row to understand what I'm looking at here. It looks like I've got this kind of nested object, two parts, Twitter info, user info. And in fact, if I look at my histogram, there are in fact two bars, one labeled Twitter info and user info. If I click on one of these bars, this is kind of one of the clicks that you could do all throughout the UI. Data prep makes a suggestion that I want to create a new column, as you're seeing here below in the suggestions, and you're seeing it's unnesting. All right, this is great. So I'm going to unnest these two columns. I'm going to highlight them both, add this to my recipe, and then I'm going to drop this first column. All right, so we went from a scary single nested object to two scary nested objects, but I think we're getting closer. So I can basically do the same thing as I did before, right? Yep. So as I click on a column, I'm getting now the timestamp, and look at that. It even knows that it's a timestamp. And so now the histogram's meaningful. I'm already getting excited. So I'm going to highlight all four of these, add these to my recipe. How are we doing? Has anybody unpacked JSON this fast before? Okay. If you do, we can talk afterward. I want to do what you're doing. All right. Then I'm going to do the same over here. So I've flattened my JSON file. I'm going to add this to the recipe. Don't mind me. I'm just cleaning up these columns that we don't need anymore. All right, so in just a couple minutes, I'm totally making sense of this. And I don't even know what JSON means, right? So I'm looking at this histogram. It's a timestamp, and it actually looks like a fairly representative histogram. Like I might see like a morning peak here, midday trough, evening peak. So this is a time series histogram. The others, if it's not time-based, are just a Pareto, highest to lowest type of thing. And these all look like normal Paretos, kind of the 80-20. And this is kind of the fairly common part of the process. I'm wanting to explore my data set. So location's got a bunch of missing values. Maybe these are optional. This looks good. Let's just leave this here. We've got other data sets to explore. I don't quite know what I want to do here yet. Oh, but I did want to make note. I talked about us operating on a sample. So up here at the top, we're seeing that we don't know how big this file is, but data prep took a 10 megabyte, as we expected, sample of the data set. And I could choose to collect a new sample if I wanted. Perfect. So up here at the top is my navigation bar. I've got my flow, and then the data set I'm in. I'm going to switch over to web chat. Yeah. I mean, I didn't really like the nested JSON, and this log file is not really doing it for me either. All right, so I told you that it's a good place to start with the histograms. So up here at the top, this histogram is telling me nothing other than there's a bunch of these things. I'll select that bar. Turns out these things are these kind of meaningless lines that would probably cause us trouble in the future. The suggestion is to either keep or delete. So I'm choosing the second card here, if you can see that. So the color all turned to red as a preview that we're going to delete this column. I haven't really fixed anything yet, but I'm feeling a little better that I've gotten rid of that problem. And then I see there's a missing value. Perhaps this was like a header or something. But if there's any empty rows, I probably want to get rid of them too. There it is. There's my one row that, again, might cause me problems in the future. Going to delete it the same way. All right, I'm sorry to bore you with the cleaning, but it's what we do, and it's tedious, and it's kind of like flossing. I'm going to select now. I'm going to try and make sense of this. So I've got this. We call this unstructured data, right? So this is big, giant line of text. But you and I can see that there's something in here. You can probably see that there's like a session ID. There's also a source here. And so what I need to do is somehow communicate to data prep some of what I'm wanting to do. So I've selected this key. That makes sense. I want to probably extract the source ID. But I don't want to extract just the source ID. So I'm going to highlight this key here. And now data prep has an interesting suggestion for me. It says this is key value pairs, and I should extract the key value pairs according to the pattern, create a new column. Well, I don't like these nested fields, as I mentioned, but I think we're moving in a direction that I can deal with. So I'm going to add this to my recipe. Now I can work over here, and I see in my now my semi-structured, so I went from unstructured line of text, and now I have a semi-structured object, which is not always comfortable, but is actually more usable. And I can do my little trick from our previous file we've all learned. You people are all experts now. The suggestion is to unpack this structured object. Now I'm to structured, to relational data. I'm going to go ahead and do some cleanup, as I've done previously. You people all have the luxury of seeing this from a comfortable spot, but I'm up here, prone to make mistakes, so I'm going to clean up. All right. Now, we've got some structured data. I'm looking at our histograms, and they look meaningful, useful, and I'm noting that we're picking up we're auto-detecting some types here, which is always very exciting as you're using data prep. You're moving in the right direction. I'm seeing these two columns. So source just looks like the same URL over and over again, although I appreciate that it's detected it's a URL. And then this geoinfo is still not making sense to me. Let's take a second and maybe, so we've kind of been exploring for a while, but we probably came into this with some inkling of what we wanted to do. We're measuring customer service and web chat support. Maybe my hypothesis is that wait time is going to be a key indicator for me. And I'm not seeing wait time in any of the information I've seen yet. I am seeing here that these are actual call logs Can everyone see this okay? Actually, I can zoom in further if we're, okay. So I'm seeing actual call logs in here, like an agent will be with you shortly, and I'm seeing timestamps. So if I can grab these timestamps, I might be able to approximate wait time. I'm also seeing that there's kind of two sets of data here. I have this like some key value pairs and then the timestamps, and they seem separated about this point. Again, I'm going to suggest to data prep that maybe we should delimitate here. It first thinks it's going to choose for all the spaces. I don't want all the spaces. And so in my card, I can, actually let me highlight one more of these to help it out. In my card, I can, so it wants to split into 84 columns. This is the split card, and it actually has other suggestions within the suggestion. So the second kind of little bump here in the suggestion is split not into 64 columns, just into 2. That's all I want. So I'm going to select this second one. But note, it's only splitting on this like vague criteria of the space. The third one over splits into 2 columns, but it's a little more precise. It's after 5 digits and before a bracket. I'm a little more comfortable with this when it runs across an entire data set. So I'm going to add that to my recipe. And as is customary, drop the column. Okay. Oh, actually, I didn't want to drop that column. Well, this is a good time to review what we've done so far. Mistakes happen, more often with me. Over here on the right is our recipe. So all the steps I've done so far have been collected here in the order I've done them. I can reorder these, which is a little bit scary. Don't do that. And I can delete and edit them. So I'm going to rewind this here. And because I actually definitely don't want to drop geoinfo, I'm going to go ahead and delete it. I mean, you can see previews along the way. So this isn't too scary of an operation when it's previewed before. Okay, let's ignore the geoinfo. We've done a lot of key value pairs today. Let's try and do this like wait time thing. If I can get to these timestamps, can you imagine trying to get these timestamps out with SQL or with Python? You'd have to do some like regex, which always involves me going to like a browser to like read up on regex again. So I'm going to highlight a timestamp. So this first one is when, I guess, the chat initiated, presumably. And this next one is when it's assigned to a person. So I think the difference between that first timestamp and the second timestamp looks interesting. So it's ready to extract just one timestamp. It's always helpful to give data prep at least 2 kind of highlights to work with. Now it's ready to extract the first timestamp. It's reasonable, but I want the first 2. I'm going to see if asking for additional bumps here is going to help, and it's not helping. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to actually highlight the second timestamp. Forgive me, folks, if I'm moving too slowly for you. But here we are. We got the first 2 timestamps. And we're going to extract them, and you can see them previewed over here. And in fact, when they get over there, you can see that, again, the types identified. These are timestamps. Awesome. Add these to my recipe. So far, we've shown you how to use all the suggestions. I mean, this has been like point click. I'm not even doing any work. But here we're going to do a little work. So there's nothing really to click on to discover wait time, right? I can't just highlight these things. So we're going to use the kind of step editor at below. Now there's the step builder and editor. We don't actually throw you just into like a blank script editor. It comes with all kinds of like autocomplete and hints and suggestions. I'm looking to like extract or derive a value from a calculation. And here's a derived suggestion. It seems to match what I want. The formula, I could browse through some functions here to find the formula I'm looking for. There's all kinds of analytical functions supported. I'm familiar with like a couple date functions from my data science days, and this date diff is basically, I think, what I need. I'm going to give it the first column and say, oh, you know what? I could do this. Yeah, we'll do this. We'll do this like this. Okay. The start column is the geo info 3, and the ending column is geo info 4. I want these in terms of seconds, probably. Hopefully my support staff aren't waiting for hours. And you see my preview. You're also seeing some data validation. So if I put, seconds, it's not going to work for me as well as here. I've calculated my wait time. I'm going to add this to my recipe. And I do that as an example to see you that you can dive into these and modify these steps as necessary. Now, it was a little confusing for me to refer to these as GeoInfo 3 and 4, so let's do a quick rename. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, here's a view I didn't mean to explore, but you might benefit from. So this is, at any point you can look at a column distribution in detail, look at the top values of that column, the histograms. Let's back out of here. I'm going to rename this. Up at the top. Okay, thank you. So this is initiated time. And we're not going to, okay, I'm going fast. And this is assigned time. Great. Perfect. So we've done a lot here. We've got this giant table, and it tells us a lot about our users. And we've also learned along the way, because this is actually just fake data, that how to edit a sample with the suggestions. And we've also used how to use the step builder. I now want to do something a little bit more advanced. So in this URL, this source URL, they all look the same, but I'm noticing there's a URL parameter, question, account transfer, and these vary by, some of them are account lockout. So I can do I'm going to switch to the editor here. I'm going to extract from column, just to give you an idea that you can go ahead and write whatever you want if you prefer scripting to the mouse. So in my source column, I'm going to extract a URL parameter, and because this is typed, it understands what URL parameters are, and we saw in there that the URL parameter of interest was called question. Once that's fully validated, that in fact there is a URL parameter in that column called question, I add it to my recipe, boom. I now know what question was asked to which rep, how long they were waiting. I've done this all in we're still going 20 minutes here, folks. I'm going to keep you for the full hour. We're doing 10 data sets. We're getting it all done today. I'm going to bed early. Okay, drop in this column. Perfect. All right, so we've done now these first two data sets. Let's go jump over to this customer database just to get a view of all of them. This one comes already structured and relational. Again, the first thing I do is look at the histograms. I'm seeing a bunch of missing fields here. And I'm also realizing that this isn't much of a customer database as it really is looks like web analytics. Last completed step. I guess it could be customer database. But either way, this is tracking users through a process, perhaps through a kind of a checkout or purchase process. I'm assuming that we're wanting to get users through all the steps. And there's several steps missing from several values missing in the last completed step. I'm going to highlight these missing values. And as I scroll through my data set, I'm seeing that I'm going to highlight these missing values from status 2. So I see here there's succeeded, incomplete, terminated. So the last step, either people succeeded, they terminated, or they were incomplete. These empty rows are probably they went away and never came back. I'll make that assumption. I'm going to go ahead and modify. So I'm going to keep, let's see, set status. So right now I'm setting the status to nothing. I'm going to modify this. I don't think we've done modify before, so this is a good example for you. Instead of modifying to null, and you'll notice here there's actually some suggestions. I could modify to NA. I'm going to say no return visit, and add that to my recipe. Perfect. I think we're done here. So we've cleaned, we've structured in the case of like unnesting these JSON files. Now I want to enrich these data sets. They're only so good alone. I could do, let me go back to my web chat file here. To start a join, I'm going to select it from the transformation editors. And I'm going to first join the web customer database. You know, if I might have looked earlier for common keys, but I don't think I need to. I'm just going to select join keys. And immediately, as mentioned earlier, data prep is going to detect and suggest common keys to join. So session works. I can add additional join keys. Turns out that both customer and user ID join here. And if I were being more careful and I had more time, I'd probably confirm that these are in fact the right keys to join on. But I did this before, and they are. So yeah, it's okay. So I'm going to select all the columns and take out these duplicate columns. Now I've got this giant wide table. And if any of you are familiar with some of our data products like BigQuery, you know that a giant wide table is exactly what you want in BigQuery. So you can use this process at home and get your BigQuery tables all set up. Awesome. Now I can also, let's stop there. So I could join this Twitter data set, but I think I've got enough for the web chat and the web customer database joined. And I'm going to go ahead and run this job because I feel like I've got everything ready now. I've enriched, and I want to do my analysis. As mentioned, you can use data flow jobs within data prep to write to either cloud storage or BigQuery. I'm going to select BigQuery here. I happen to have a data set ready for us. I'm going to create a new table and choose the replacement logic. I've got my job running. And as data flow starts to run this job, I'm going to show you the monitoring interface. I mentioned earlier that you may not want to look at this monitoring interface, but it's kind of fun to look at least once, to get a feel for what's happening under the hood. So here we are. As mentioned, this job has been taken from kind of translated from your recipe, your script, into Apache Beam Java code. It's now running on Dataflow. We'll come back to this. I actually have, let's see. I did this ahead of time. So this is Data Studio. As some of you may know, announced earlier, Data Studio came originally out of our analytics offerings. It's now part of Cloud Platform and is available in every country as of just recently, perhaps this week. I've gone ahead and built a quick dashboard on top of our output data. And what you're seeing here is, I had that hypothesis from the beginning, like, is wait time causing bad ratings? So I've got here wait time in one scatter plot versus ratings, and I'm actually not seeing much of a pattern. It looks like wait time doesn't actually affect ratings. Personally, for me, I think it does, but not in this data set. I've got this other one here, which is how far along they got in the process. Was it terminated, succeeded, no return visit, incomplete? We're also seeing that wait time seems to play no role here. But the rating, the customer service rating, made people twice as likely to succeed in the process of checkout, for example. So we should be focusing on the rating. And I'm seeing over here that my agents while they have various wait times, they're all kind of in band. Nobody's waiting much longer than anyone else. But the ratings are actually quite different. And I've got these kind of two low performers down here. Finally, we were able to extract that question bit. And from the questions, I can see that one of these questions has a terrible wait time. In fact, I'm guessing that maybe there's a queue for that question. And we haven't quite mastered how to do this queue, or maybe we haven't fully trained people on how to respond to this question. I'm learning a lot. This dashboard took me maybe 5 minutes to put together. You can see how I'll quickly, I can edit this pretty easily. Drag these around. Free to use, give it a try. Let's go back to our data flow job here. You can see how many workers were spun up, some of the auto-scaling patterns. This is a very small job. It would just use one worker. Nothing really interesting to see here. And I wanted to go back and show you, but I didn't have it pulled up, BigQuery. So this is where I'm writing my data sets. You can see our giant schema we created is here and previewed, and all the data we've written. And I can bump back. I have another example here. Excuse me. I went full screen, and now it's giving me trouble. Let's see. So here's a list of, I ran a bunch of jobs earlier just so you could see what this job list looks like. I've got one currently running. I've got several completed. I can show you profiled results. And I'm kind of rushing here because I'm realizing I'm running low on time. But as promised, here's what job profiles look like coming out of data prep. Let me, if you don't mind, switch me back to my presentation. I just want to wrap up with a couple more slides. We talked through the demo. What you've seen today is you've seen data prep take raw data, create refined data through the steps we discussed earlier, exploring, cleaning, structuring, enriching. And we, again, did this in a half hour with some pretty nasty stuff, like the giant log file, nested JSON. And then where this gets really interesting is you saw that last bit, how easily I can pull this into Data Studio. I write it to BigQuery, Data Studio reads from BigQuery. This is also powerful and an important offering for our cloud machine learning products. We're trying to democratize artificial intelligence and machine learning, and a big part of getting machine learning right is getting your trained data clean. And so we have to democratize data preparation as well. So a lot of you are asking, I want it now. I can see it in your eyes. If I weren't talking, you'd all be screaming at me. A couple of points for you. So you can request early access today. We have some companies in early access, and we're looking for more. That's right. And even if we don't extend you access, we'd love to keep in touch, and we can give you updates on the program and as we're approaching public beta. You can also try this today downstairs, maybe not at this hour, but definitely tomorrow. That's up to those people. It's in the code labs. We got one set up for you. Pretty excited about it. A couple other pointers for you. Our UX desk is looking to talk to people using our data analytics products. Please stop by. And I personally would love to talk to you. Send me a tweet, because then I can analyze all my tweets, and I can analyze you, and you know I will. All right. That's it for me. That's same as my next step slide. Thank you so much for your time.